My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 42 years old, living in Boston, Massachusetts. For 20 years, I believed I had built a marriage on trust, respect, and unshakable love. My husband, Thomas, was charming, dependable, and admired by everyone around us. But behind his perfect smile lived a world of secrets I never imagined. By the time the truth clawed its way into the light, I realized I had been living inside a carefully constructed lie. And the worst part? Everyone seemed to know, except me. Stay until the end, because the betrayal I uncovered turned my entire life upside down. From the outside, Thomas and I looked like the ideal couple. We had a comfortable home in the suburbs, 2 wonderful kids, Emily and Josh, and careers that allowed us to live without financial worries. Thomas worked as a financial advisor, often admired for his discipline and sharp mind, while I was a high school English teacher who adored literature almost as much as my students. For years, our friends would joke that Thomas and I were marriage goals. He always remembered anniversaries, bought flowers for no reason, and kept up the image of a doting husband. I believed it all. I wanted to believe it. After all, who questions happiness when it seems so perfect? But cracks had been forming for longer than I realized. He would work late, sometimes claiming he had urgent clients or business trips. I noticed how his phone never left his side, even at the dinner table. When I asked questions, he had polished answers ready, convincing enough to silence my doubts. Until one evening, Emily, now 17, mentioned something that froze me. "Mom, did Dad ever tell you he went to New York last weekend? I saw him in a photo on Instagram with a woman. He said it was work, right?" My stomach turned. New York? He had told me he was in Chicago, and the woman in the photo, she wasn't just a colleague. The way she leaned into him, the way his arm circled her waist, spoke volumes. That night, as Thomas slept beside me, I stared at him in the dark. Every late night, every missed call, every strange excuse replayed in my mind like a cruel puzzle finally clicking together. And in that silence, I realized the man I trusted, the man I had defended for 2 decades, was living another life. A secret life I was never meant to discover. But I had, and now nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after Emily's comment, I couldn't focus on anything. My hands shook as I poured coffee, my chest tight with the weight of suspicion. Thomas sat across from me, scrolling through his phone with that same calm, collected smile. To anyone else, he looked like the picture of a faithful husband. To me, he was a stranger wearing my husband's face. I decided to test him. "So," I said casually, "how was Chicago? You never really told me much about that trip." He looked up briefly, then back down at his phone. "Oh, it was fine. Long meetings, nothing exciting." His voice was steady, but I noticed the flicker in his eyes. A pause that wasn't there before. That pause confirmed everything. Later, when Thomas left for work, I sat with Emily and showed her the photo she'd mentioned. She pointed immediately. "Yes, that's the one. Look at the way they're standing, Mom. That's not business." The woman was younger, blonde, stylish. Her hand clung to Thomas like she owned him. My stomach turned. I couldn't breathe. Still, I wasn't ready to confront him without proof. My heart wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, but my mind screamed otherwise. I decided to dig deeper. I opened our laptop. Thankfully, Thomas sometimes forgot to log out. Emails, travel itineraries, hotel receipts. At first, nothing suspicious. Then I found it, a message from Sophie. Short but intimate. "Last weekend was perfect. Can't wait until the next one, miss you already." My hands trembled so badly, I almost dropped the laptop. That night, Thomas kissed my forehead before bed, just as he always did. I forced myself to smile, my body rigid with rage and heartbreak. Lying there, I stared at the ceiling, torn between screaming the truth in his face or waiting for the right moment to strike. One thing was certain, my marriage wasn't just broken. It was a lie. And Thomas had no idea that I now held the first pieces of his secret life in my hands. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and silent rage. Every time Thomas leaned in to kiss me goodbye, I fought the urge to push him away. Every word he spoke felt rehearsed, hollow. I began to wonder, how long had he been lying? Was it months? Years? I needed answers. One evening, while he showered, I slipped into his office. His briefcase sat open, files scattered. Buried beneath them, I found a receipt, 2 tickets to a play in New York. The date matched the same weekend he'd told me he was at a financial seminar. My chest tightened. He hadn't gone alone. The name on the e-ticket read, Sophie Carter. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a fling, it was deliberate, planned. He had built an entire second life in the shadows while I raised our daughter, while I trusted him with my soul. Later that night, as Thomas hummed in the kitchen making tea, Emily whispered to me, "Mom, are you okay? You look pale." I wanted to tell her everything, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I destroy her image of her father? Instead, I said, "Sometimes people wear masks, sweetheart, and sometimes those masks eventually fall." Emily tilted her head, confused, but I could see her wheels turning. She was old enough to sense the storm. The next morning, while Thomas left for work, I called my closest friend, Rachel. My voice cracked as I told her what I had found. She gasped, then spoke with a sharpness I didn't expect. "Anna, you can't let him keep doing this. He's stealing years of your life. If he's built this secret world, you need to tear it down before it swallows you whole." Her words sank into me like fire. That evening, I sat at the dinner table across from Thomas. He smiled, asking about Emily's school project, pretending to be the devoted husband. But I knew better now. His lies were spreading like cracks in glass, and soon, very soon, everything would shatter. For the first time in weeks, I felt a dangerous calm settle over me. Thomas thought he was still in control, but in truth, his secrets were no longer his. They were mine, and I was ready to use them. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. I tried to push away the doubts, telling myself that every marriage had its challenges. But deep down, my instincts screamed that something wasn't right. I could no longer ignore the late nights, the secretive phone calls, and the way he avoided looking me in the eyes. One evening, as he claimed he had a late meeting at work, I decided I couldn't sit in silence anymore. Instead of waiting at home, I drove toward his office. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. My heart racing faster with every mile. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I had to see the truth for myself. When I arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty. His car wasn't there. My stomach dropped. If he wasn't at work, then where was he? I sat in the car, staring at my phone, debating whether to call him. But then I remembered the small voice recorder I had found weeks earlier in the drawer, something I had bought during a brief wave of suspicion, but never used. That night, I decided to act. I placed the recorder in his car before he returned home, hoping it would finally reveal what he was hiding. The next day after he left for work, I retrieved the recorder. My hands shook as I pressed play. At first, all I heard was silence, then the hum of the car engine. But then came his voice, soft, tender, and directed toward someone else. He was speaking to another woman. The words weren't just casual, they were filled with affection, with promises he never gave me anymore. My world shattered in that moment. The lies I had ignored suddenly stood in front of me, undeniable and sharp as glass. For years, I had believed in us, believed in him, and now it was clear. He had been living a life I was never meant to know about. I turned off the recorder, my chest heavy with a mix of rage and heartbreak. I couldn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I sat there in silence, realizing that my marriage had already ended long before I discovered the truth. But one thought burned stronger than the rest. If he thought I would stay silent, he was wrong. That evening, as I waited for him to return home, every tick of the clock echoed like thunder in my chest. My mind replayed the recording again and again, each word cutting deeper than the last. By the time his car pulled into the driveway, I wasn't just hurt, I was ready for answers. He walked in casually, loosening his tie, pretending as though nothing was wrong. But when his eyes met mine, he paused. Maybe it was the way I stood, rigid, arms folded, or maybe he sensed the storm that had finally broken inside me. "Long day?" he asked, trying to sound normal. I held his gaze. "Where were you last night? And don't say the office, I already know you weren't there." His smile faltered just slightly, but enough to confirm my suspicion. "I told you meetings ran late," he replied, his tone sharp now, as if my question offended him. I stepped forward, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "I have proof. I heard everything. The late-night calls, the promises you made to her. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" His face turned pale, then hardened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally, with a heavy sigh, he muttered, "I didn't want you to find out like this." The words crushed me. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't even trying to protect me anymore. Instead, he confessed with silence, with a weary acceptance that twisted the knife deeper. I felt the tears welling up, but I refused to let him see me break. "All these years," I whispered, "I gave you everything, my love, my loyalty, my trust, and you threw it away for lies." He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. The distance between us felt wider than it had ever been. In that moment, I realized something vital. I had been the last to know, but now I was the first to see him for what he truly was. As he struggled to explain, I turned away. My heart was shattered, but my spirit was no longer blind. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger. And though the pain was unbearable, one truth gave me strength. This was no longer my burden to carry. The morning after our confrontation, I woke up to silence. The house felt emptier than ever, even with him still sleeping in the other room. For years, I had shared my life with a man who wore a mask, and now that mask had finally slipped. There was no repairing the wreckage he left behind. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. The woman who looked back at me wasn't weak anymore. She wasn't blinded by love or chained by his lies. She was hurt, yes, but stronger than she had ever been. When he woke, he tried again to justify his betrayal. "It wasn't what you think," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. But I didn't need excuses. I had all the answers I would ever need. "I'm done," I told him firmly, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "You've stolen enough of my years. You don't get to steal my future, too." His face crumbled, panic flickering in his eyes. For the first time, he realized he had truly lost me, not because of the woman on the phone, but because of the lies that had piled up, one after another, until they buried our marriage completely. I packed my bags quietly, methodically, like a soldier preparing for a final march. Every folded shirt, every zipped suitcase was a piece of my freedom being reclaimed. He tried to stop me, begged me to stay, but his words were empty. The love I had once clung to was gone. As I closed the door behind me, the weight lifted. The air felt cleaner, the silence no longer suffocating. I wasn't walking away in defeat, I was walking away in victory. His lies had caught up with him, and I refused to be their prisoner any longer. I didn't need revenge. His greatest punishment was living in the ruins of his own deceit. One day, he would look around and realize that the life he destroyed was the only real thing he ever had. But by then I would be gone, healing, growing, free. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't breaking someone else. It's rebuilding yourself stronger than ever before.